Hello, friends. It's McGruff here, your old friend McGruff, and I've got a good surprise for you. It's Mr. Stokely, and boy, is he all excited about reading you a story. Aroo! I sure am, McGruff, and you know what, kiddos? I have missed you like you would not believe, and I've got another great story for you tonight, and it is by one of my favorite authors, by Chris Van Allsburg. Not only does he write the story, but he also illustrates it. And you probably know Chris Van Allsburg, even though you may not know it. He has written such books as Jumanji. He has written Polar Express. And he has also written many others. He has over 20 to 25 books altogether. And when it's all right for you to start checking out books again, why don't you head down to the public library and get you a few Chris Van Allsburgs, because the one thing I like about him is he always makes you think. And this book here, Two Bad Ants, this story is about two ants and their perspective of the world. That means the way we see the world as humans. If you think about it, if you're a little ant, you probably see the world quite a bit different. So let's see what happens to these two ants in Two Bad Ants. Here we go. The news traveled swiftly through the tunnels of the ant world. A scout had returned with a remarkable discovery, a beautiful, sparkling crystal. When the scout presented the crystal to the ant queen, she took a small bite, and then she quickly ate the whole thing. She deemed it the most delicious food that she had ever tasted. Nothing could make her happier than to have more, much more. And the ants, they understood. They were eager to gather more crystals because the queen was the mother of them all, and her happiness made the whole nest happy. Well, it was late in the day when the ants departed, and long shadows stretched over the entrance to the ant kingdom. One by one, the insects climbed out, followed the scout, who had made it clear that there were many crystals where the first one had been found. But the journey was long and dangerous. They marched into the woods that surrounded their underground home. Dusk turned to twilight, and twilight to night. The path they followed twisted and turned, every bend leading them deeper and deeper into the dark forest. Now think about this, my friends. This is not the kind of forest that a human would experience. But if you're a small ant and you're walking along the dirt and you see these big blades of grass that look like trees, it probably would seem like a forest to you. More than once, the line of ants stopped and anxiously listened for the sounds of hungry spiders. But all they heard was the call of crickets echoing through the woods like distant thunder. Dew formed on the leaves above, and without warning, huge cold drops fell on the marching ants. A firefly passed overhead that for an instant lit up the woods with a blinding flash of bluish-green light. Well, at the edge of this forest stood a mountain. The ants looked up and couldn't see its peak. It seemed to reach right to the heavens, but they didn't stop. Up the side of the mountain they climbed, higher and higher. Now, friends, have you ever seen a mountainside that looked like this? What does this look like to you? Well, the wind whistled through the cracks of the mountain's face. The ants could feel its force bending their delicate antennae. Their legs grew weak as they struggled upwards, and at last they reached a ledge and crawled through a narrow tunnel. When the ants came out of the tunnel, they found themselves in a strange world. Smells that they had known all their lives, like smells of dirt and grass and rotting plants, those had vanished. There was no more wind, and most puzzling of all, it seemed as though the sky was gone. Think about this, friends. If you're used to seeing the sky up above you, and you're where the ants are now, and you look up, there's no sky there, that would probably be pretty confusing. They crossed smooth, shiny surfaces that followed the scout up a glassy, curved wall. They had reached their goal. From the top of the wall, they looked down below at the sea of crystals. One by one, the ants climbed down into the sparkling treasure. Guys, have you figured out where the ants are yet? That's right. They're in someone's house. Good guess. Quickly, each one grabbed a crystal, then turned to start the journey home. There was something about this unnatural place that made the ants nervous. In fact, they left in such a hurry that no one noticed the two small ants who had stayed behind. "Why go back?" asked one of the other. "This place may not feel like home, but look at all these crystals." "Well, you're right," said the other. "We can stay here and eat this tasty treasure every day forever." So the two ants ate crystal after crystal until they were too full to move, and then they fell asleep. Have you guys guessed what the crystals are? It's probably an ingredient in some of your favorite foods. Look right here, guys. You see the letters G-A-R. Could that be a sugar bowl, maybe? Let's find out. Well, daylight came, and the sleeping ants were unaware of changes taking place in their newfound home. A giant silver scoop hovered above them and plunged deep inside the crystals. It shoveled up both ants and crystals and carried them high into the air. The ants were wide awake when the scoop turned, dropping them for a frightening height. They tumbled through space in a shower of crystals and fell into a boiling brown lake. Now, what's liquid, guys, that you might put sugar in? Hot cocoa, tea, coffee? Let's find out. Then the giant scoop stirred violently back and forth. Crushing waves fell over the ants. They paddled hard to keep their tiny heads above the water, but the scoops kept spinning in the hot, brown liquid. Around and around the scoop went, creating a whirlpool that sucked the ants deeper and deeper in. They both held their breath and finally bobbed to the surface, gasping for air and spitting mouthfuls of the horrible, bitter water. I bet it's coffee. Let's find out. Then the lake tilted and began to empty into a cave. The ants could hear rushing water and felt themselves being pulled toward the pitch-black hole. Suddenly, the cave disappeared and the lake below became calm. The ants swam to the shore and found that it had steep sides. They hurried down the walls that held back the lake, and the frightening insects looked for a place to hide, worried that the giant scoop might shovel them up again. Close by, they found a huge round discs with holes that could hide them again. Take a look at this, friends. See if you can guess what it is. Well, as soon as they had climbed inside, their hiding place was lifted, tilted, and lowered into a dark space. And when the ants climbed out of the holes, they were surrounded by a strange red glow. It seemed to them that every second the temperature was rising. It soon became so unbearably hot that they thought that they would soon be cooked. But suddenly, the disc they were standing on rocked upward, and the two ants went flying through the air. They landed nearby what seemed to be a fountain, a waterfall, pouring from a silver tube. Both ants had a powerful thirst, and they longed to dip their feverish heads into the refreshing water, and they quickly climbed along the tube. And as they got closer to the rushing water, the ants felt a cool spray. They tightly gripped the shiny surface of the fountain and slowly leaned their heads into the falling stream. But the force of the water was much too strong. Plop! The insects were pulled off the fountain, and they plunged down into a wet, dark chamber. Think about this, friends. At the bottom of your sink, there's a good chance that your parents have this. See if you can figure out what it is. They landed on a half-eaten fruit and other soggy things. Suddenly, the air was filled with loud, frightening sounds, and the chamber started to spin. Wah! The ants were caught in a whirling storm of shredded food and stinging rain. Then, just as quickly as it started, the noise and the spinning stopped. Bruised and dizzy, the ants climbed out of the chamber. Well, in daylight once again, they raced through puddles and up a smooth metal wall. And in the distance, they saw something comforting. 2 long, narrow holes that reminded them of the warmth and safety of their old underground home. They climbed in to the dark opening. Bum, bum, bum. Do you guys recognize what that is? Here's a suggestion. Don't ever stick your fingers into that! Well, Once they got in the holes, they thought that they were safely inside. But a strange force passed through the wet ants. They were stunned senseless and blown out of the holes like bullets from a gun. And when they landed, the tiny insects were too exhausted to go on. They crawled into a dark corner and fell fast asleep. Well, night had returned when the battered ants awoke to a familiar sound, the footsteps of their fellow insects, returning for more crystals. The two ants slipped quietly to the end of the line. They climbed the glassy wall and once again stood amid the treasure. But this time, they each decided to choose one single crystal, and they followed their friends back home. Standing at the edge of their ant hole, the two ants listened to the joyful sounds that came from below, and they knew how grateful their mother queen would be when they gave her their crystals. And at that moment, the two ants felt happier than they had ever felt before. This was their home. This was their family. This is where they were meant to be. And my friends, that is Two Bad Ants, illustrated and authored by Chris Van Allsburg. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did, and I'll be back in a few days with another great story for you. Remember, friends, reading is succeeding. Have a good one. Love you guys.